Hey, let's learn how to make killer animations using Theatre.js. Theatre.js is a JavaScript
animation library with a powerful motion design toolset. It helps you create any animation, from cinematic scenes in Three.js to delightful UI interactions.
Huh, that's too boring. Story time. Once upon a time, web developers were facing a serious problem. They had skills to create stunning websites, but they were struggling to bring their designs to life with animations. Their websites were static and lifeless, lacking the sparkle that their clients were looking for. They searched high and low for a solution, but nothing seemed to work. They tried different libraries and tools, but they were either too complicated, too limited, or too time consuming. They were at their wits' end, and the future looked bleak. That is, until one day, a magical tool appeared. It was called Theatre.js, and it promised to revolutionize the way animations were created on the web. The developers were skeptical at first, but they decided to give it a try. And to their amazement, it was everything that it promised and more. It was easy to use, yet incredibly versatile, allowing them to create stunning animations that brought their websites to life. They could make objects bounce, spin, and twirl like never before. The developers were overjoyed, and their clients were thrilled with the results. Word of Theatre.js spread like wildfire, and soon web developers all over the world were using it to create amazing animations. The once struggling developers were now at the top of their game, thanks to this powerful tool that saved them from their struggles. And that, my friends, is the story of how Theatre.js saved web developers from their animation woes. So if you are struggling to create animations on the web, Theatre is here to save the day. Let's get started with animating a cube in Three.js. Download or clone the starter template from the link. Install the dependencies by typing yarn install and then start the server with yarn run dev. This gives us a basic scene with a torus node and some lighting. Now let's add Theatre.js packages, core and studio. Once that's done, we need to import studio and initialize by typing studio.initialize. We also need to import get project from Theatre code. Let's create a new project using get project and passing in the name of our project. And then a sheet object that will contain our animation sequence. Now that we have the Theatre.js setup, press Option or Alt and / to reveal the studio UI if it's hidden. Here you can see the name of the project and the sheet we created to the left, outline menu on the right. I went ahead and super quickly cleaned up the code and created a simple cube and a floor. You can clone it from my GitHub link in the description and run yarn install to get you up to speed. This gives us a gorgeous cube and a circular floor and some orbit controls. Before we can animate anything with Theatre.js, we need objects and props. Let's start by creating a box object that belongs to our sheet, calling it box. Then we add some props. Let's start with rotation of type compound. And add XR, YR, and ZR. Now we can see that we have a new box object in our sheet. We can use this to modify the rotation of a cube using the onValues change hook. Quickly logging the values, we can see that changing the values of the props triggers the hook. So we'll read the rotation values into XR, YR, and ZR. And set the rotation of a cube. Moving the sliders now rotates the cube. Props can be configured to be of a specific type in order to have more granular control over the inputs. Let's add a new type of number and then set a range from pi to minus pi. Copying the same and creating props for position as well as scale. Let's set scale to 1. And modify the range of position and scale to -10 and 100 or whatever you want. I changed the flow to a cylinder geometry and disabled auto rotate on orbit controls. Let's see how to add some keyframes. You can right click on any of the props and click sequence or sequence all. This brings up the dope sheet editor with the sequenced props. Drag to move the pointer and click the yellow button to add keyframe. To have more control over the prop slider, we can set a nudge multiplier value to 0.001. Time to animate the cube. We don't need to play with the rotation or scale for now, so let's sequence the Y position. Setting it to 40 seems good, and by the way, you can zoom in and zoom out of the editor timeline as well as resize the default length. There are 30 frames in 1 second, although the animations play independent of that at 60 Hz or whatever the frame rate of the display is. Move the pointer to 2 seconds and add a new keyframe with the value of Y as 40. Then place it at the 1 second mark and set the Y position to 0 to add another keyframe. Press space to play or pause the animation sequence. Holding shift and dragging the cursor selects keyframes. Then right click to copy or delete the selection and paste it at the pointer location. Changing the value at the middle to 5 so that it looks like the cube pauses at the bottom. Sequencing the scale now. Fast forward my attempt at trying to make a bouncing animation. Clicking this button opens up the graph editor for the pros who want to finish their animations. Click on the links between keyframes to reveal a handy list of easing curves that can be used. Cleaning the bounce, we need a sharp change at the bottom of the animation. Let's make this sharper.
Disappointment.
Press space to play. That looks good. Scale seems messed up, so let's redo it. Make it 1 at the beginning and then before the impact. Reduce the scale to 0.6 or somewhere there at the middle, and then stretch it at the next keyframe before finally coming back to 1 on the last keyframe. You could spend more time fine-tuning the animation. We now need the cube to be squished on impact. Let's start by changing the scale along X and Z axis to 2 at the 1 second mark. Then set those to 1 on the last keyframe. Okay. We need to stretch on impact and snap back to 1 immediately. Set it to 1 on the 4th keyframe. Increasing the Y stretch a bit, and there you go. I'm not a professional animator, but
guiding others to a treasure I cannot possess.
Moving on to editing some colors. Let's create a new object and name it colors. And have a prop background color of types RGBA. Similarly, we create one for the floor color and box color. Modify the on values change to set the background color of the scene. Clicking and dragging the color picker changes the color. Now that works, let's do the same and set the cube and floor colors too. I'll just copy over my predetermined colors over here. Just to upgrade the visuals, let's set the tone mapping to linear and output encoding to sRGB. Add some fog and be sure to match it with the scene background. It would be nice to make the cube glow when stretched. Let's play with the emissive value of the cube. Creating a new theater object, box effects, and add a prop box glow. Use that to set the emissive color in the on values change hook. Then sequence that and add 2 keyframes with black as the color, and then for the compressed state, move the slider and set it to white or red. Then come back to normal on the last keyframe. I wanted to create a cartoonish effect with speed lines. Let's create 3 cubes and modify their scale to look like lines and add them to the scene in a group. Modifying the positions and scales until satisfied. Adding more props to the box effect objects, scale and position. Add them to the box effects object and set scale and position. Sequence them. Add and modify the keyframes until you get the desired effect. Time for some comic boing text. Import CSS 2D renderer and object. And create a text renderer. Initialize the new CSS 2D renderer. And call render in the tick function. Make sure to set style.position to absolute and update the DOM element of the orbit controls. Creating a new CSS 2D object and adding it to the scene. And also a corresponding HTML element for the same. Adding this text object to the box makes it follow the box position on the screen. Moving the text to be beside the cube. Let's create a new text effect object with props for opacity, text, and scale. On values change, update the inner text of the HTML element. That's a fun thing about Theatre.js. It can be used to modify and animate text too. Sequence all the props and add keyframe to make the text pop when the box bounces. We don't need the text until the cube bounces. Set opacity and scale to 0 on the first keyframe. After the box bounces, set it to 1. Make sure that the opacity is 0 right before that. Finally, adding some sound effects. I searched online for some free sounds and imported them to the project and loaded them using Three.js audio loader. Once that's set up, we need to play the sounds based on the pointer position in the sequence. We have a hook for this, onChange. Moving the pointer locks current position. Let's use that to play sounds at specific intervals. Just to make sure that the user has interacted with the page before we can play sounds. Add a new event listener for click. Then set sound ready to true. You can play the animation using sheet.sequence.play. Set the iteration count to infinity and range as 0 to 2. Set the playback rate to 1.7. We need to export the animation and deploy it to production. Click on the project name in the Studio UI and click Export to JSON. Save the exported state and import it into main.js. Under Get Project, pass the saved state. Remove Studio as we do not need it for production. You could also do this instead. Check if dev mode, then initiate Studio and use local state, else use the exported state. I went ahead and added some HTML and CSS, and voila! Voila! A bouncy cube animated with Theatre.js. Here are also a few variations. That's it from me. Until next time, have a wonderful day.